Hey everybody, this is PD from Spin Rack, and today I'm going to do a video on the new X-Men. I've done a bunch of videos on the old X-Men. I'm not done. I have a couple more to do, but I decided to do the new X-Men up until they go monthly, just to give you an assessment of where they were at, right? So while the new X-Men after Neil Adams worked on them, they went into reprints because the book wasn't, even though there was a buzz around this arc that Roy Thomas and Neil Adams had, the title had only went up just a notch. So they decided to keep it in reprints, but it actually was bi-monthly. So it was like 6 times a month. Or what does it call that? Is that called? It was, yeah, it was 6 times a year, 6 times a year, right? So at some point, Roy Thomas, who had tried to reintroduce the X-Men, allowing them to show up in Captain America in their original outfits, and then he also Roy Thomas did a story where they showed up in their civilian attire, sort of saying that these weird characters could kind of, show up anywhere and you could recognize them. And there's no really buzz about them, but Roy Thomas decided, what if we bring back the X-Men and we make an international group? Let's take off of DC's book, which we call the Blackhawks, which they were international team. Let's have an international team of mutants. Maybe that'll make the team work. So ultimately, he decided that he'd put Wein on the title, and he would be, since he's good with dialects, be able to handle all these international voices. Already had Wolverine sitting in the wings. He'd already been created. So they were going to add they had a couple other characters that I think, Banshee from Ireland, you had Sunfire. But then they were going to figure out how to flesh this new team out, right? So I guess I should go and do a quick share, right? So here's the cover of the giant size X-Men, right? So this is actually done by Gil Kane, but it was inked by Dave Cockrum, who is the artist and the I don't say the brains, but basically a lot of the X-Men characters would be coming out of his sketchbook, right? So he had his sketchbook. He's fresh off of the Legion of Superheroes. So him and Lean are kind of going back and forth on this, right? So they had Colossus, who they thought was going to be the star of the book. And of course, Dave Cockrum already had Nightcrawler, which was the character that he had always planned on using. Thunderbird went through a couple of different outfits, but similar to what you see here, those colors. But it was a little more streamlined than what we saw. And then they had a character called Typhoon, and who was a male character who controlled weather. And we had this character called a Black Cat, which is a black woman who transformed into a black cat. And when she turned into an actual cat, she'd be called Tabby, right? So Lynn's big contribution here was that, hey, what if we get rid of the guy and we give the black girl his hair and we give her his powers? And they switched around, and that's where we got Storm, Aurora Monroe, and they brought in Wolverine, besides the other two characters I taught you about. Now, when drawing this cover, these are the mainstay characters of the new X-Men. And Cyclops would stay. The idea was that once this story is over, the old X-Men, most of the old X-Men would leave, and Cyclops would stay, but he'd have a new revamped visor to go with it. Now, Gil Kane drew this, and he got the design of Wolverine's helmet wrong, but Dave kind of liked it, so they kept it. So he inked this and kept it as is. So they had the mainstay of these new X-Men, right? So if we go to the actual story, and this I don't want to go to because these things go a little long, right? So we had the cover, and the co-creators, Lin Wen and Dave Cockrum, and we have Glynis Wen, at that point was his wife, John Costanza, who I think they switched letter at some point there. This is second Genesis. And we get there a brief intros to these characters. We have the Nightcrawler, who kind of gets a lot of spotlight here because this is one of Dave Cockrum's favorite characters. So we get him, and he gets the origin similar to Cyclops. If you remember Cyclops' origin, he was on the run. And this time they have a guy who actually looks like a demon on the run because he's a mutant, right? And he takes a different angle, and Professor Xavier shows up, and of course he shows up with Wolverine. And but this thing where he stops things, he doesn't do it at times when he needs to. So he kind of allows the X-Men to fail at times instead of using his power to control people, right? And we introduce, I guess I should kind of stop around here. We got Banshee, but then they get him involved, and then we got Storm. Now this, when we appear here, she has, she's this sort of African goddess in Kenya, and she always helps them with the storms, and then she meets up with Xavier, and he talks about her joining, right? But she, not to say backwards, but just a little, like no interest in clothes, this, that, and the other. So very much someone that hasn't been in civilized territory, even though, she's not in need of any of that. So, right, Stormfly, Sunfire, who we already seen, and Colossus gets this big moment with a character that we would see later, Liliana, right? And this was seen to be the star of the book in their mind, and there's Thunderbird, who it's a bad attitude. We get to see the new X-Men. Now, for some reason, Dave Cockrum didn't give masks to these characters. Obviously, his costumes work without masks, but at the same time, only a few of them have masks. We have Banshee, Storm, and Colossus without masks. Right? We get a hint to what happened to the X-Men. They go to trek from this mutant. Now you have to remember, when we look at this island, we think people are born with mutant powers. And I think Jack, what's his name, the Living Diamond, he was a person who was affected by radiation and became a mutant, right? So similar to like how superheroes get their powers, but he was considered mutant. And this is similar to that, where we have this mystery, and of course, we know that, that the X-Men go to find out what's going on this island, and this who's a big part of the X-Men today, is as they go on this island, they go through all these pitfalls, and they find the original X-Men, and actually Krakoa is an island that walks like a man. It was a nuclear explosion, and that sort of brought him forth as a person, gained intelligence, and I guess the other important part is that we had Polaris with Storm doing something that Chris Claremont added to the story, right? So they keep him in one place, and they actually shoot the island off of that and destroy him, right? Yeah, I guess this is the scene, right? So Angel asks, what do we do with 13 X-Men, right? So X-Men 94 is another big one, which is for big sales. X-Men 94 is one of the big ones, possibly as big as Giant Size X-Men, right? So this is where the X-Men leave, the original X-Men. Now, I think Terry Austin talked about it and say this was kind of sacrilegious to have these imposters as the X-Men. But the plan was for the originals to go. Jean Grey would become Miss Marvel, which of course they decided against that. She had all these different costumes, and they decided to do Carol Danvers as Miss Marvel. So you can see later, Chris Claremont brings her back to the book, right? So Sunfire, who's ever volatile, he breaks out. Banshee stays, and the originals all break, right? Xavier's not too happy about this, and they say their goodbyes, right? Cyclops decides to stay. Now we're not getting to anything classic X-Men because it goes against everything that went on in these books as we go through the classic X-Men stories, right? So that will be dealt with in a separate video. We cannot do that and compare these to this because it's very much stuff that's tacked on, added on, and sometimes contradictory and or retcons of stuff that's happening here, right? So they go to this Valhalla, and this is where, now, no one would accept this sort of story these days. The X-Men are fighting the Animen, who are, what was it? They're Wallace Wood's characters, who I think Dave Cockrum worked with Wallace Wood and a big fan. So right now, we would look at this and say the Daredevil ones, the characters that Daredevil fought by himself, they're going to take on the X-Men. But this is Chris Claremont. I think he took over the plot. No, he's this is still Lee Wein. I think the next issue took over the plot. But we would not accept this sort of thing, right? So I'm not going to get too far into this one because the rabbit hole of these X-Men stories, I'll never get through this. But the next key issue is Chris Claremont takes over this issue. They're still fighting the Animen, right? And Nightcrawler gets a lot of light in this issue, right? See him taking out one of these characters as they go, but at the same time, they get in another big fight with the Animen. Wolverine actually gets beat by Catman, right? And Colossus saves him, right? But this leads you to something else. The X-Men come out up top. They stop, what's this one? I think she's Bumblebee, right? And as they're planning this stuff, we see Thunderbird try to stop Count Nefaria, and for some reason Banshee can't catch up, right? But this was supposed to be the big shock that Ling Wen had, that you'd be in there all right, and the X-Men would lose a character. They would go for the shock value early on in the series. Say that, there could be dire consequences for these actions. But, Thunderbird is kind of, he's a kind of upstart, and he won't give up. And both Banshee, and this is why I said in the other issue where his brother wants revenge, we have Xavier and Banshee trying to get him off of that, and he's like, no, he will not. And then, of course, Nefaria blows it up. We don't know that Nefaria is still alive, and Xavier has to suffer through this. Same with Banshee, right? They're trying to tell him to get off. But this was the original plan to have some sort of shock value to the title, right? And then this would be the morning issue, right? Another big action story. So one of the things that they're also doing is this title is really rolling. This is, especially when Chris Claremont gets on it, he just thinks of it as a freight train. He's trying to capture that Fantastic Four vibe from 44 through 70. That you have Cyclops mourning the death of Thunderbird, right? He's destroying part of the land by mistake. Somehow he's just walking around in the field and he hits this thing that's close by. Doesn't realize he's released. This is a classic how Marvel stories get happen. And then we have Wolverine ready to take out Colossus. Then Storm stops it, but then he tries to kill Nightcrawler, and then we have to have a talk with him. Now, I'm going through this issue because at the same time we got through the other one, we meet Moira McTaggart, right? She shows up. She's clearly going to be Banshee's girlfriend, but she has some history with Xavier, right? And if I can get through this video, I'll explain more of that, right? And then we hear this is a subplot leading up to what's going to happen in I think it's 2 issues from now, but we have I think this is Stephen Lang, and he's going to lead this Project Mutant, this Armageddon thing. It'll lead to some tough times for the X-Men, right? And then, of course, Cyclops get tossed around by this monster. They're all fighting, but they're not getting any headway. Everyone is doing their best, Wolverine. But then at the same time, Xavier tries to get in his mind, and that doesn't work there either, right? So since no one can do anything, Lauren McTaggart picks up an M16 and starts shooting at this. And then Banshee's kind of like, let's get her out of here. But a lot of the pros and some fans wrote in, it's like, how does the housekeeper know how to use an M16? Now, they developed that story later, so you would understand how she gained ability and all of her history, right? And then Storm stops it, and she has a vision of her past. So now, this thing of her dealing with claustrophobia has just been hinted here, right? So as we go along, let's get out of that. Let's go back to this page, and we're into 1976. And this issue is leading to some of the more cosmic stuff, but we're not going to know that either, right? This is going to be obviously because Chris Claremont likes and Dave Cockrum like Havoc's outfit, so why not bring him back? So since we got rid of him, let's bring these guys back as villains. But at the same time, Xavier's having these weird dreams about this galactic space thing. Now, anything in Dave Cockrum has to have some space subplot. So we get this magnificent spread hinting of this character that's sort of looming over Cyclops, right? No, sorry, Xavier. I keep messing up words. Now we have Xavier getting out of bed, but he has this connection with Moira. We don't know what it is yet, right? So these guys are settled in, they're outside, or they're not connected to Muir Island yet. This is just kind of the place they were at. I think in the Hulk issue when you ran into them, somehow they went back to it, right? But she gets attacked, right? Then Polaris has got some weird costume. She takes out that, and they're seeking the death of Charles Xavier, right? So the X-Men are at Kennedy Airport, and they meet up with Jean. Jean, now they've realized Jean is going to be a mainstay, but they get attacked by Havoc and Polaris, right? Cyclops is kind of torn, but the rest of the X-Men are there. Leads to this great explosion. The art in this stuff is just phenomenal. Like, this is just like gorgeous stuff, kind of packed in there, a little cluttered, but it's really powerful stuff, right? But then we introduced to Erica Red. Now, Cyclops was also calling himself that, right? And Jean's kind of the damsel of distress in this story, but Storm's kind of showing off what she can do. But this shot here of Havoc is good lord, right? Cyclops had this big fight with Erica Red, and then another great shot of Havoc. So yeah, the art in this is just amazing, right? So it's just basically set up for some issues to come, but it's like, obviously they liked Havoc, and they gave Polaris a whole new costume without a mask, of course. And we still have Stephen Lang, who's kind of looking and looming, but then there's someone else looking at him at the same time. right? And we got we've already shown Wolverine get knocked out. Now we got another scene where Wolverine is battered around by Cyclops. He's this thing of arguing over nothing, and he's gonna gut Cyclops, but Storm stops him, right? So this is I don't like getting into all of this stuff here, because the next ones are the Sentinel stories, right? And they look pretty formidable here, but at the same time, this is where the X-Men start to diverge into the comic book thing, where comic book characters go to space, same way Superman does, and the Sentinels are kind of like paper mache. Well, I'll show you, right? So we have this great Christmas thing, and we get an appearance by Stan and Jack, I think penciled by, inked by Marie Severin. This is the first kiss that Scott and Jean have ever had. It's been drawn by Dave Cockrum. Even though John Byrne drew one in the X-Men 138, that is sort of a scene that we did not see. So this is the actual in-comic kiss that they had. But then the Sentinels have returned, right? They come in, Jean looks even more spectacular. Dave Cockrum kind of took what Neil Adams did and kind of added more of a punch to it. But then Cyclops, now this is one of the things that the originals couldn't do. We have one Cyclops taking out a Sentinel, but then the other one is able to take out, Cyclops and knocks out Jean. Right? Cyclops saves himself, but then at the same time, Havoc comes and catches them, and it's the three of them against a Sentinel, and Storm makes short work of that Sentinel, right? So Xavier is out there, and of course, once again, Xavier is able to use his mental power to take out a Sentinel, but then another one, no, he gets blinded by this space creature, and then the Sentinel comes and takes him away, right? So they've captured, and that's why they captured all the rest of those X-Men, right? Let's see, how did they capture them? They, Banshee's going. So we don't get to see what happened to Banshee. I'm not sure if a page is missing. 10, 11. No, so we find out that Wolverine and Banshee are captured. Now they do a scan of Wolverine. They don't find any adamantium skeleton on him, right? But they don't think he's a mutant. Right, at the same time, when Jean gets smacked, Wolverine loses it, and he takes out a mutant Sentinel by himself. So this is the idea that these Sentinels are pretty much useless in this story. Even though they captured some of them, these guys are able to take out this. Like, they make short work of these ones, like 3 of them, and they make short work of them, right? So then Banshee they actually wind up in space, right? So I said I wasn't going to do it, but I have to. I think this one, they're out in space, but then they make it back in because the Sentinels capture them and put them back in, right? So here's the other problem here. Here's the X-Men going into space. Now, people complain about the Fantastic Four, where we have Johnny and we have Sue going into space. We have the the African character who doesn't understand why people need clothes. We have Cyclops, who's not an astronaut. We have Cyclops, Colossus, who's a country bumpkin. And we have Nightcrawler, who's a circus freak. And now Storm also is a character who is claustrophobic, right? And then, of course, he thinks of his brother, who's a cosmonaut. And it's just like, wait a second, there's no mention that they had a cosmonaut brother in the first issue, right? So this is, but it just added to, like, the X-Men was something that you could just tack on all this stuff to them, right? So we're adding some stuff to Storm. We're about to see that. We're adding stuff to Wolverine as we go along. It's just stuff's being added on, like the relationship between Mora and Xavier, right? And there's another subplot, but this gets them back into some coloring errors. But see here, Nightcrawler is able to take out one with some sort of metal thing. He just yanked off. So it's one of those things that they just kind of fall apart, right? So of course you have to have something even better to fight against them. But we don't get to see it, and it leads to the X-Men versus the X-Men, right? This one is another one just for the arc. Like here's X-Men versus the X-Men, and look at this stuff. Like in these X-Men have like sort of better teamwork than the new X-Men. But of course, it's the new X-Men books now, so they slowly take them over, and we find out that Wolverine has a way to see people, or here's another cool shot, see people without, sight. And he says it's not Jean. And he hacks away. This is the first person he got to hack at. We find out it's a robot, right? So Cyclops has had it. He's broken out. He frees the team. And then we think that Stephen Lang is dead. So they have to get back, but there's this bad solar flare that's happening. Similar to the FF, right? So Jean says, of course, Xavier is knocked out or something. So she uses the mind of, I think it's Corbeau. He uses his her mental powers to take his ability, and she would try to use her telekinesis power to kind of shield herself, but I don't know how that's going to work. But she does that, and leads to the sound of this. And we also have this named Jean and Wolverine not getting along, right? And then we lead to the man. This is one of the high-priced book way back in the day, with the first appearance of Phoenix, right? And one of the things that happened as they crash, that, and they wind up in Jamaica Bay. X-Men somehow make it out, and then Jean says this lines, but people didn't understand why she was saying it. Hear me, X-Men, I'm no longer the woman you knew. I am fire and life incarnate. Now and forever I am Phoenix, meaning it was different from Jean, right? And she would not kind of play that up. Why? But then Wolverine comes with some flowers, and he sees the rest of the team, and he kind of tosses the flowers, right? They find out that Jean is okay, right? And everybody's happy to see Mora and Banshee are together, even though there's a connection with Xavier, right? So they're gonna go on vacation, right? So they go to Cassidy Keep, but there's a plan, a plot. At the same time, Storm is able to get dolled up. As Nightcrawler can change his face, wind up with meeting Juggernaut and Black Tom Cassidy, which would be Banshee's brother. But then Storm falls apart, right? For some reason she's been in this building and she falls apart, right? And this is a book that I think I had. This is the first issue that I had, that I remember I had. Some of the other ones I've read, but I know I bought this one as a back issue in the 80s. Storm is going through this claustrophobic thing where she falls apart, and Juggernaut is just taking it to the X-Men, right? Then Storm's still out of it, and we reveal that why she's claustrophobic, because she remembers when she was in Harlem. Now we've added this whole thing. It's another add-on to the series, added on this her being from Harlem, where she's wearing clothes. Somehow she doesn't understand clothes when she gets to the X-Men. So in this thing, she's been in Cairo, walking around and figuring things out and surviving. I think Byrne says that most Claremont characters, they have this modesty blaze to her, characteristics to her. And then Jean has these moments where she has these weird like things where she says she brought herself back to life. And then at the same time, while they're having this unnecessarily fight between Xavier and Cyclops, Xavier sees this woman, right? And of course, the Nightcrawler gets another power. He's invisible in total darkness, right? And he can also swing from his tail. His tail can support himself. And they've beaten that. So I think in the next one is just a resolution of that story, right? I think the next one is just, and it leads us to John Byrne. We're not going to go too far after that, but we're going to just get through these, right? So we have this issue. I think there's some leprechauns. Yeah, there's some leprechauns in this issue. And what else? Is there anything else here? Get captured, but then we have Nightcrawler using an image inducer to change how he looks. And at the same time, we have Magneto coming, and we have a space guy coming, right? So we got through that. This is the big one, because as you see, this is the X-Men. All the original X-Men stuff was mainly about mutants. And outside of fighting Havoc and Polaris, they haven't really dealt with any mutant issues. So this is where Magneto shows back up, right? So this is where the first time they also meet with some sort of anti-mutant sentiment. So they buy this thing, they ship off. The storytelling in this is kind of wacky, but it is cool. So it beats wonky storytelling, right? To destroy the X-Men ship. X-Men get to Mora Island. Now this is another big surprise. Mora is actually a housekeeper, but she's actually a physicist, a just geneticist, right? And then Sean Cass is like, "What the hell? She needs to talk. Why would she become a housekeeper?" Right? So now the X-Men, they're being shuttled right into it. They don't know what's going on. We know because of the cover. They blast in, and Magneto shows up, and it's like, wow, right? And this story, we get to reveal that somehow Eric the Red puts him to adulthood. We have Cyclops getting in here. He's trying to get to save the X-Men. The X-Men are fighting them, and he's able to use his claws, toss around Cyclops. So there's two X-Men in storms. Electricity doesn't help. So the new X-Men are really at a loss in fighting Magneto, right? The only one that has powers that can fight against Magneto is Banshee, but he has a plan to get around Banshee, but Cyclops comes up. Cyclops comes, puts Magneto at bay, and then he frees the X-Men and runs. Wolverine wants to fight. He's like, no, let's get out of here. We have, I think it's Bumblebee. She breaks out. And this was supposed to be a story that Cockrum wanted to do by her getting out. But at the same time, we have Mutant X, right? So since this is gonna be a while before we get to that story, I'm gonna give you a big reveal here, right? Mutant X was supposed to be the child of Xavier and Mora. This is why she was like, Professor X, we have Mutant X, right? And this thing is open. So all this danger there, but Magneto is actually triumphant. She was able to beat have the X-Men run off, right? But we have this character who I already know who Landry is. This is Quasar. He comes in there, so all the space stuff is coming towards the X-Men. We don't know who's bad or good. We know Eric the Red is bad. We have Jean meeting with her parents after she's been sick, and with Misty Knight, and This is the Phoenix coming out party, right? Right, so there's Fire Lord, and this is the hint that we have a character that's powerful like Thor, right? So Eric the Red is there, and these two, they're ready to fight Eric the Red, and they got him turning tail. The X-Men finally working together, but Fire Lord is here, right? Fire Lord is making short work of the X-Men. Remember how that's the same Fire Lord that Spider-Man, that couldn't touch Spider-Man? This character is able to defeat most of the X-Men by himself. And then, but hey, I guess at the same time we have, oh no, they kind of tricked, this is a flashback, tricking him to help them. And then we have a Star Trek scene, and then they realize that the Earth had pushed back Galactus. They don't know the details of it, but they hightail it out of here because they were chasing after Lilandra, and she is able to get away. At the same time, Lilandra appears. He knows her name, right? And at the same time, she's resting, and then Fire Lord is here. He's coming after Charles Xavier. But then she's like, because I am Phoenix. Now, parents are able to see this happening. And we see that Phoenix is more powerful than Fire Lord. Then we possibly have either, could be Cockrum, could be Claremont and Byrne here. Who knows, right? And then X-Men are coming to save the day, but they get another ship blown up. But then Phoenix is going up and fighting, and then you have Eric the Red takes Lilandra, right? And then jumps through the Stargate, and then it goes away. What's the name? Of course, going to send the X-Men off to save the day, but Phoenix uses her power, and they're like, what is going on? How did she get all this power, right? And then, of course, Cyclops says she's one of the weakest X-Men, which she wasn't. But, you know, whatever floats your boat. And then Fire Lord is bad. Now, this next issue is just going to show you just who drew this? Was it Cockrum? This issue was to give Dave Cockrum a break, right? Because even though it was 6 times a year, there's a couple of double-sized issues. There's a grind for him, right? So it's possibly in the first year 8 issues to do because there's 2 double-sized. But what can you do? He was struggling with the deadlines. Now, this would be them fighting the original X-Men again. So I'm not going to get into this one. This is more of a fill-in type story, right? Let's get to the meat and bones. This is, since it has Dave Cockrum on it, this was actually supposed to be a crossover. Not an official one between Marvel and DC, but Marvel contacted DC saying they wanted to do something with the Legion, and the Legion would have some characters like the X-Men, right? Stan Lee nixed DC having that, so we only got the Imperial Guard, right? Great shot, you know. So this, just remember this shot of the characters being able to stare towards the camera, stare at the artist, right? And we would see where no X-Men has gone before. We would fight the Imperial Guard, which would be like the Legion of Superheroes, and we have this big battle that would lead into them X-Men pretty much surviving, but the Star Jammers stop it, and they have to stop Lilandra's brother Deccan, right? So I think that's ultimately, but this will be Cockrum's last official issue, and because he was, well, basically it wasn't because he was running late, because the X-Men really wasn't picking up. I've already done the issue about the sales. Archie Goodwin, who after it started with Roy Thomas, then they went through Jerry Conway, Ling Wen, Marv Wolfman, Roy, and then Archie Goodwin took over, and he was on the X-Men at this point. Now, he talked to the higher ups, and they said they were gonna fire the X-Men, we're gonna keep him, but if I can get, he asked Terry would he stay on if he got John Byrne to draw it. He joined if John Byrne joined. He said yes. He said all right. So if John does it, we can get the X-Men to go monthly, right? So we had this big fight, and I guess I'm gonna just get to this issue to close this off. This isn't when they went monthly yet, but I just want to get to the Byrne issue because Byrne was very nervous about taking on a book that Dave Cockrum already did. That he was worried about the look, so he kind of asked Archie, "Can we get Sam Granger to ink it so the kids aren't bothered?" And Byrne used all these examples, and Archie Goodwin, who's the editor, sees the editor. There's no shooter here yet, no way involved in it yet, right? And Archie Goodwin says no to Byrne, and this is Byrne's first struggle. He's saying the characters aren't staring at me; they're staring at the other way. And Shooter said you should have found a way to get them to stare back at you, right? So. But there's a lot of story and a lot of characters, so Byrne is kind of doing some decent kind of storytelling to get all this stuff in there. The worry in this scene, the fight being over, and these scenes here, a quick recap of what happened, and then we get to the fun, right? So we had this is Joff, right, and there's Mutt coming up later, and these are the names that Byrne kind of threw in, right? So Wolverine's still a punching bag, gets punched out in space. They're fighting Joff. They can't defeat him. He's this big, powerful character. Byrne initially didn't want Joff to be a robot, but Claremont made him into a robot. So we've seen Joff appear in X-Men Elsewhere, right? So when you have Mud, he's the big monster, right? And this is where one of the Starjammers helps out, and bang, now they're in the crystal, right? And Jean has this drawn to it. And when touching it, it gives all these terrible things. And this is where the first hint that there's something wrong with her. Where Jean is a ghost. She's seeing herself as a ghost, right? So it's connecting to what we'll see later, right? Now, here's a letter that Byrne had printed in this to apologize to the fans for taking over the X-Men, right? So he starts it. I'd like to make my apologies in advance. Taking over a book from another artist is bad enough. Oftentimes, one style's different from the other, and the readers are subjected to a quantum lurch. But taking over a book from an artist one has admired for years, I might even go as far as to say the artist I have myself been a fan, puts the newcomer through almost as bad a lurch as the readers, sometimes worse. Taking over the X-Men has put me through changes. Oh boy, has it put me through changes. Not enough that I have to follow Dave Cockrum's footsteps, but the role of artists on this book reads like a who's who of comics. Kirby, Smith, Steranko, Adams, and now Byrne? Byrne? Who's this guy? What has he done besides a late, lamented Kung Fu book? Okay, he co-created a popular little robot a few years back, but no one's handing out laurels for past glories. So bear with me, folks. Give the new kid a chance. Marvel trusts me. After all, they let me play with Spider-Man and the Avengers and Daredevil and now the X-Men. Bear with me. We may all come out of this alive. John Byrne, London, Ontario, May 10, 1979. Right? Get to the end, we'll say another passage. So they're in the crystal. Cyclops is knocked out. Jean is trying to fix the crystal with her powers. She's doing her best to do this, but she doesn't have enough strength. She draws on the X-Men and Starjammers, and she's able to fix the universe, right? And the X-Men come back. They agree to Fire Lord. The Stargate is destroyed, and then everyone, and then we see Landra and Xavier. Landra was always going to be Xavier's girlfriend, and that's why Mora and Banshee are kind of together, right? But there's a history that Kosar is Cyclops' father. All the stuff that just got tacked on that just works for some strange reason. And then the book said the book is dedicated with respect and admiration to Dave Cockrum, who made a dream a reality. And I'm Not Dead by Dave Cockrum. Just to say that he's not dead, right? So there we go. We got through the transition from not success yet, going from Cockrum, all this creation, all this energy, all this excitement, passed off to Chris Claremont, who added to this stuff. They only did one evil mutant story, that was Magneto, and then at some point, since Cockrum wasn't good at deadlines and the book couldn't go monthly, they already had a fill-in. So then, and the book wasn't selling enough, so they got Byrne to try to get this thing going monthly. So we haven't got to the big stuff yet, but that is my first overview of the new X-Men, right? So it's exciting, it's fun, there's some things that are contradictory, but at the same time, it's still a lot of fun, right? Anything else? Any other bits that I could say about this? You clearly see that Phoenix is way more powerful than the Herald of Galactus. So that's one thing to know. That's like, I don't know, I guess Thor was initially more powerful than Silver Surfer. So I guess as it's gone by, the Herald of Galactus kind of looked to be even more powerful. But I guess that's about it. Wolverine is coming back all beaten up, so we don't know. Well, the hint was that he was able to survive being punched into space. So we haven't figured out Wolverine yet, but we've seen the Cyclops bat him around, and now we see someone punch him into space. 2 different power levels, so I guess that's it. And here's a nice silhouette by Byrne at the bottom. You'd see him do these sort of things where you could figure out, obviously, you got Xavier, we got Landra, then we got Cyclops here, and Colossus, Banshee, Wolverine, who's being carried. We got Nightcrawler, we got Jean and her parents, and Storm here, right? So it's clearly you can figure out who all these characters are, right? So next issue would be an issue that was an idea from Dave Cockrum that someone would come back for Wolverine since they've spent all this money on him. So yeah, that's it. I got through that. It's very exciting, even though there's some things that I did have to critique. This is just fun, gorgeous art. And, as Byrne said, it was a struggle for him to join in this title, which had such a great artist on it. And R.I.P. Dave Cockrum and Len Wein, right? Spinner Rack is going to be